When you think about retiring in India, it really all boils down to one huge question, doesn't it? How much of your hard-earned savings can you actually spend each year without worrying that the well is going to run dry? We've all heard the rules of thumb, but today we're going to dig into what the data actually says is a safe number specifically for India.
You've probably heard it a million times from financial planners, on blogs, everywhere. It's the famous 4% rule. The idea sounds so simple, right? Just withdraw 4% of your total savings in your first year of retirement, adjust that amount for inflation every year after, and you should be set. But what if I told you that for an Indian retiree, blindly following this advice could be one of the biggest financial mistakes you ever make?
See, here's the thing. The problem with the 4% rule is that it wasn't made for us. It wasn't designed for India. It was born out of a very specific set of economic circumstances in a different country, decades ago. And trying to just copy-paste it here, well, that ignores the very unique financial realities we face every single day.
So where did this magic number even come from? Well, it all started back in 1994 with a study by a guy named William Benjamin. A few years later, in '98, the now famous Trinity study came out and basically doubled down on the 4% idea, cementing it as the gold standard. But notice the one thing they all have in common? They were based entirely, 100%, on historical U.S. data. And that, right there, is the problem.
So what is it that makes India so different? It really comes down to two major financial headwinds that can just chew away at your retirement savings. First, our historically high inflation. And second, the unique way our taxes work. You put those two together, and you've got a perfect storm that can completely sink a retirement plan that's built on American assumptions.
Let's zoom in on something called the tax drag. It sounds a bit jargony, but trust me, it's a simple and frankly a pretty brutal concept. So, you have a fixed deposit, and it earns, say, 7% interest. That's your nominal return. But here's the catch. The government taxes you on that entire 7%. It doesn't care that inflation might be at 6%. So you think you made a 1% real return, but after you pay tax on the full 7%, that tiny gain can get completely wiped out. You can actually lose purchasing power while thinking you're in a safe investment.
And wow, this table just lays the damage bare. Take a look. This is for a super safe portfolio made up entirely of fixed deposits, assuming a 30% tax bracket. If you try to pull out just 3.5% a year, the research shows there's a 61% chance you'll run out of money within 30 years. And at 4%, forget about it. It's a 100% failure rate. Let that sink in. Your safest possible investment becomes a guaranteed road to ruin.
Okay, so we've established the 4% rule is a no-go. So what's the right number? Well, the research we're diving into today ran some really sophisticated simulations. We're talking models built from the ground up using Indian market data to find a much more realistic benchmark.
And that brings us to it, the most important question of this entire explainer. After all the number crunching, what is the number you can actually build your retirement plan around for a secure 30-year retirement right here in India?
There it is. The study lands on a much more conservative range, somewhere between 3 and 3.5%. Now, that might not sound like a huge drop from 4%, but believe me, in the world of retirement planning, that is a massive shift. It has huge implications for how much you need to save. So let's look at the data and see exactly how they got to this number.
This table shows us the math. What we're looking at is the Safe Withdrawal Rate, or SWR, that gives you a 95% chance of not running out of money over 30 years. Now check out that last row, a balanced portfolio with 40% in equity and 60% in fixed deposits. The more conservative Monte Carlo simulation tells us the safe number is just 3.0%. The more optimistic bootstrap method gets us up to 3.8%. Either way, the message is loud and clear. That old 4% rule is just playing with fire.
So how do they actually test this? They use two really powerful simulation methods. Think of the bootstrap method like this. It's like taking a video of India's actual market history and just hitting replay thousands of times. The Monte Carlo method? That's totally different. It's like rolling a set of financial dice over and over again to create countless possible futures, including wild ones we've never even seen before. By using both, what has happened and what could happen, you get a much more robust answer.
All right, so we have our new, safer number. But knowing that number is really only half the battle. The other half is actually building a portfolio that can stand the test of time. It's not just about spending less, it's about investing smarter. And that really starts with how you allocate your assets. A pretty common strategy you'll see is a mix like this one. 40% in equities to give you that growth you need to beat inflation, and 60% in fixed deposits for stability and peace of mind.
And, as we just saw in the data, this kind of mix can support a higher withdrawal rate than if you just stuck everything in FDs. But there's a limit to how much heavy lifting your equities can do. And this is a really critical warning that came out of the study. You can't just keep cranking up your equity exposure to justify pulling out more money. The research is clear. Once you go past a 3.75% withdrawal rate, the risk of your portfolio failing shoots up, no matter how much equity you're holding. The extra volatility just starts to work against you.
So if you can't just add more stocks, what else can you do? Well, the study explored adding another asset class that's practically in the DNA of Indian households, gold. So instead of just 2 asset classes, you create a more diversified, 3-legged stool for your portfolio.
So what exactly does gold do for you? Well, it acts as a diversifier. Its price doesn't always zig when the stock market zigs, or zag when it zags. It often moves to its own rhythm. That means it can act as a valuable buffer, a cushion, when the stock market takes a nosedive. The data showed that adding just 10% gold can actually reduce your portfolio's chances of failure. It's like an extra layer of insurance.
Okay, let's talk about maybe the single biggest danger in all of retirement planning. It's something called sequence of returns risk. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple and absolutely terrifying. Getting hit with a big market crash right at the beginning of your retirement can be catastrophic for your long-term survival.
You might be thinking, okay, but how likely is a bad start, really? Well, the numbers are pretty sobering. Based on the historical Indian market data used in this study, there's roughly a 1 in 5 chance of your equity portfolio taking a 10% real hit in any given month. That's not some once-in-a-lifetime event. It's a very real possibility you absolutely have to plan for.
And just look at this chart. This is shocking. So if you're using the risky 4% rule on a 40-60 portfolio, your normal chance of failure over 30 years is around 25%. Not great, but okay. But if you get hit with that nasty minus 10% shock in your very first year of retirement, look at that second bar. The failure rate skyrockets to 76%. This one chart says it all. Protecting your money in those first few years is absolutely non-negotiable.
Okay, so we've busted the 4% myth. We found a new, safer benchmark for India. And we've seen just how dangerous some of these risks can be. The goal now is to take all of this and move away from some universal one-size-fits-all rule and start building a smarter, personalized strategy.
So let's boil this all down into 4 key takeaways for your own retirement plan. Number 1, start with a much more conservative withdrawal rate. Think 3.0 to 3.5%. Number 2, always be mindful of that tax drag. It's a silent portfolio killer. 3, diversify with a purpose. Use assets like equity and gold to create balance. And finally, number 4, actively protect your portfolio in those first few years of retirement. The sequence of returns risk is real.
And perhaps the most important takeaway of all is captured perfectly in this final quote from the study's conclusion. Retirement planning isn't a set it and forget it kind of deal. It's a living, breathing process. The market will change, your life will change, and your plan has to be flexible enough to change right along with them. The real safe withdrawal rate isn't just a number, it's a commitment to staying awake at the wheel for your entire financial journey.